Well, hello, everyone. I'm Jill Bloom, group publisher of Walls and Ceilings, and thank you for joining me for a very special episode of If Walls Could Talk. And I'm honored to be joined by Steve Slepcevic, the CEO of Strategic Response Partners, who happens to be in Hawaii at the moment. Steve, thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me, Joe.
Well, scary time. So, Steve, tell everybody, where are you exactly and what is happening?
So I'm down in just outside of Lahaina, down in the island of Maui, as a result of these wildfires. So we came in literally just behind the wildfires. Once we got news that next morning, there's a team of us, a first team of first responders that responded to this wildfire incident. Showed up at the EOC and then just started assisting with a lot of needs and resources and equipment that they needed to put in place for this big event.
So now, Steve, how did you get there? Did you fly commercial? Do you have your own helicopters? How did that happen?
No, I mean, the airports were open. So for us, typically commercial. Sometimes we'll fly private just to get into private airports when certain big airports are closed. We do have contracts with the different helicopter services, and we've used some of the big medical helicopters in the past, that'll run us two islands with our search and rescue teams, our security teams, and stuff like that. So logistically, that wasn't necessary. A quick commercial flight, direct Los Angeles to Hawaii, and into Maui, and then just got to work. We're literally off the tarmac and just moving our Pelican cases, throw them in the vehicles, and right into the zone. So,
And so how are you helping right now? What's happening at the moment? Like, what are you executing?
yeah. So initially, there was a bunch of clients that we've done work. It's interesting. I've been coming to the island since I've been 19 years old. That's the place where I really, as a kid, I was about 10 years old when I started surfing. But for me, I drew a set of plans for a good friend of mine that they wanted a two-car garage built in a lanai. And in that day, I was like, I got a great idea. I was just going through architecture school and doing structural design. I said, how about I draw the plans, submitted to the city of Kona at the time, and in exchange, give me a place to crash and give me, I'll build the stuff out. But when I'm done, I'm staying another week and a half, 2 weeks just to surf the islands. And that was a great exchange for them at the time. But to me, I thought I got the better end of the deal because I got some epic surf. And, it started a great relationship with many of the Hawaiians, and some of the Hawaiian greats that are big wave surfers are good friends of mine to this day, because this goes back 25 years, or more. Actually, more. I can kind of start to forget what age I'm at these days, but um, just a great network of people. And so some of the hotel owners, some of the asset owners from shopping centers, production, industrial buildings that got lost in the fire. First phone calls that were coming in were from them. Hey, can you check on my property? Can you take a look at the policy? So the policy stuff I was sending over to Skyline adjusters, the asset, environmental, all this stuff that impacted the buildings, we were doing right away. But when we pulled into EOC, our stuff was, what power do you need? What temporary power generation do you need? What cabling, what electricians? And so what other resources, both from, and then they started tapping us for all types of, hey, do you have security to man this intersection? Hey, we don't have enough electricians. We have the generators, but we don't have someone to hook them up. So a lot of that type of stuff, we were just, it's all hands on deck. Everybody helps everybody, in those situations.
No, for sure. So who do you feel was the most prepared for when you arrived? Were there contractors that are already following some of the advice that you've given them in the past, and what did they have in place, and what have you helped them put in place?
I have to say, because I don't have any filters, the response to this Maui wildfire, based on results, was one of the worst responses on the public side of it. The entities, command and control wasn't well executed. It was very poorly executed. There's people that actually were going through Lahaina town after the fires, 8-12 hours after the fires, with no security, no perimeter enclosed. People being exposed to seeing families burned in a car, and them driving by, not even realize that there was a fire in town. These are from firsthand people I know that had to process the information later, because they were going to work going, what happened last night? They weren't even aware of it when they were driving into town, the people that were outside that town. There was an alert system that failed. So it's very different from the wildfires that we've handled in Los Angeles, from the station fires to the Malibu fires to the fires in Arizona and Texas. Very different response. So I don't want to get into the weeds of that, because
Yeah.
that starts to get really critical of some departments and how things were executed or not executed is really the bigger alarm. But people are seeing the results, and it's speaking for itself, you know.
Well, how can contractors get involved and how can they help? And
So
I mean, I know we're a long way away. It's like
yeah,
total devastation, but what needs to, how can
yeah.
people help?
So the search and rescue part of it, that's still continuing. So some parts of it are still quarantined off that they can't get to. And some of my team members that I know are actually, and they're working every day from ground zero. They're actually, we're seeing each other in the mornings, at night, regrouping as to who's doing what, right? But for the contractors, I want to talk specifically to the contractors of what they need to know when they're coming back into these zones, when the evacuations orders are lifted, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to be cognizant that, especially if you're an out-of-town contractor, you got to make sure that your licensing is in place, that you have your material suppliers you're working with, seeing what's available, who your contacts and your clients are, and how you're going to work in this entire environment. It's very different to work on the islands, and it's very much about the people. So if someone's really disconnected, you're going to find yourself getting kicked out and shut down and blackballed in this town. That's the reality of it. Okay. The Hawaiian people right now are helping the Hawaiian people. So the aloha spirit, the ohana, all the stuff that comes with what makes the Hawaiian hospitality great. We have to understand that many of the people that are coming from the mainland have to respect that and be cognizant that we're in their home. This is their backyard, right? Be respectful, follow the law, get the proper permitting, licensing, city licenses, all the other stuff in place before you roll out. The other thing that many people need to know is that there's a lot of hazards around there, right? So the power lines are down, gas lines are ruptured, water's out. You know, you got to figure out that you're not coming into this town unless you have housing secured, right? How your crews are going to operate, even the ones that are coming in from Oahu. They need to understand how they're going to not impact what's happening in the local community, that they can have a lot of their stuff self-sustained, that they're not bringing additional problem to the problem. Once you're looked at all the hazards, one of the biggest hazards that people are going to be working around is the environmental impact. So as we know now, many years later, more firefighters died in 9/11 that worked on the fire than actually died in the buildings. So the environmental impact, there's going to be a ton of dust that's going to be airborne and then trained back in the air from the trade winds that come through, from the vehicles pulling debris out of the areas that are all toxic, from burnt vehicles, electronics, PCBs, plastics, asbestos, lead, that all got aerosolized and pulled and blown into properties that haven't been destroyed in the surrounding areas. In some of these areas, up to 5 miles and greater, that actually the stuff, the smoke particulate, the fine particulate is blown into it. And a lot of people say, oh, I don't see any ash or smoke, don't really smell it. But in that impact zone, when that stuff's blowing, the fine particulate is so small, it actually gets into your lower respiratory system. And you don't have to take my word for it, but you could see the studies that UCLA produced and Scripps Medical Group produced on the toxicity and how this actually affects the lungs. So this zone is going to be like another 9/11 over an extended period of time if you're working in that area without proper PPEs, respiratory, goggles on, and actually, keeping yourself completely washed down after you're done with the job, and not going into your home and then sleeping on your mattress, on your couches, and putting all the stuff all over your own personal place. So hygiene is going to be very critical, and making sure you're not breathing this stuff into your lungs. Now, as a roofer approaching these areas, I'm going to talk a little bit about walls, but I'm going to talk about roofers right now. The ash and soot, a lot of the stuff gets blown into the attic through the dormer vents, right? And it'll populate on top of the ash, on top of the insulation. It'll also blow up under shingles because there was a high windstorm. So a lot of the buildings that are down there that I'm surveying, and I got drone footage, I could share this stuff with you. You could see the shingles are completely blown off these roofs. There's ash and soot that are blown up into it. It's blown up underneath the roof tiles. It's blown into the metal roof system. So this ash and soot is carcinogenic. Not only that, but it's acidic. So it starts to eat away at the fastener, starts burning through the felt. And those roofs, even though if they may not have burnt embers on them, if they do, of course, if the tile's discontinued or you can't match the stuff, it needs to be completely replaced. But the tiles also need to be detached and reset, felt replaced, new fasteners, and that that roof's reset if it can, if you can match the tiles. If you can't, the whole roof has to be replaced. Now, the carriers owe for this. They don't like to say they owe for it, but they do owe for it based on my experience. Now, I'm not looking at their insurance policy. I'm not a public adjuster. That's Skyline's job. It's not my job. But those are the type of people that if you get into a battle, you want to make sure that you present the loss for what it is. That's on the roofing side of it. Let's talk a little bit about the interior side of it. So this is walls and ceilings, right? So the person goes into their home, they're near the wildfire, they're staying at a hotel, they're staying at a Airbnb, they're staying at their home, their apartment. They're laying on the mattress, the can light's above them, the ash and soot is sitting above it, and the building breathes. So the ash particulates literally raining. I've seen this and we've documented this. We can literally see it raining through the can lights like little, looks like waterfalls, like these little air ashes that are coming through it. The person that's laying in the bed, the kids that are playing on the carpet are sucking this stuff in. So all the walls, insulation needs to be removed. The attic needs to be HEPA vac. The ducts need to be cleaned. The attic needs to be encapsulated with an encapsulant, right? You got to chase the chases down. All the conduits need to be cleaned. And then the inside, you got to wipe the walls down. Now, if the walls have a flat paint on it and you're using a chem sponge to wipe the walls down, you're going to have to go back and paint that. These are all things that are owed. Carpet pad should be replaced, especially if it's highly contaminated, right? When the job's done, I always highly recommend everyone get what they call exit testing. You do exit testing when you do mold remediation. It's the same with smoke and ash. You should have a certified industrial hygienist go in there, pull swabs, and check every area that the remediation contractor, whoever did the work, it's not like it never happened. It's not just good enough. It's not a maid service, if you could follow me on this. It's done by proper certified master restorer that has got the certification, the IRCRC, S500, S520, what they call in the smoke and ash remediation. They have the proper certifications to have done the job. And then the best way for the asset owner or the person that owns the building, right, whoever it may be, or a landlord, property manager, is to have that clearance. So if you sell the place, or if you have a tenant in there, or if just for yourself, to make sure that you have a healthy, safe, clean building that's contaminant free, and you can go back in. And it also is a person who's a third party who says, yes, whoever you hired did an excellent job, and the place is clean and it's contaminant free. So those are kind of the things that people should be looking at as a whole when they approach these type of wildfire situations.
So do you find that most contractors have on staff an industrial hygienist that can make sure that they are doing proper PPE and respirator fit tests, so when they're going into places like this, that they are going to be safe?
Yeah, so typically it won't be an industrial hygienist. Typically, some of the contractors have somebody who's an OSHA industrial, safety type officer, right? That can kind of go through the PPEs and make sure they're properly fitted, gloves, goggles, so that when they're in there, if they're working in that type of environment, if they're doing the remediation, they're Tyvexed out, they have air scrubbers on, they have a containment set up, and they know how to make sure there's no cross-contamination going on. But typically it's going to be a third-party environmental consultant that'll actually be the one who's clearing it. And typically the best way to do it is, if they're doing the remediation, is to have a third party that's hired by the owner and paid by the owner. Because a lot of times what I find is sometimes some of these restoration contractors like, oh, I got a great third party environmental consultant, right? And he's the best in business, and we're going to go ahead and pay for it. But they know the guy that they're hiring is the guy that actually passes everything. And then the guy that shows up is Ray Charles, and he's got a stick and he's like, yeah, everything's clean. It looks good. Everything's perfect. You know what I mean? So yeah. It doesn't work that way. You have to hire somebody who's truly independent and who's going to do the proper sampling, send it to the lab, see the results, and say, yes, clean more or you're good. Because then they're on the hook as well.
Sure. Well, what are you saying, Steve, is the best way for anybody that's listening to be able to support the people of Hawaii, that are there in, at ground zero, or even on the exterior, right, that are just all affected?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that some of the best things, if you're licensed, you're properly licensed. I said, there's some commercial centers that if you're going to do this, you want to move quickly and get a space, because it's going to go quick. There's commercial and residential is very limited. If you think you're going to get labor out here, there's a massive labor shortage that was before this fire.
Mhm.
Most people now have relocated to the other islands because they're not going to
Right.
deal with it, and there's no place for them to live. So you're going to end up bringing your own crews in. That's just the
Okay.
reality. It's a different stuff,
Yeah.
and it's way more expensive on the island doing island work than it is on the mainland. So if
When
you're
when
if
the
you're
when the time comes, are you seeing that there are building materials that are available, or is that something that you think is also going to be in short supply?
well, it's definitely going to be in short supply because just the way that the island's set up.
Yeah.
So that's one area that the contractors need to check with their supplier. What do they have on the ground? What can they get now and put into their yard? So I would, if I was a roofing contractor, I would pre-stock a lot of materials. If I was a general contractor, I'd pre-stock a lot of materials because the people that are going to get the work is the people who have it ready to go on the ground, ready
Yeah.
to put it up.
Got it.
And this is it's tourism, right? So a
Yeah.
place that can open will open, and they'll be at 100% capacity because of the limited, housing rooms that are available at this time, especially on that side of the island.
And it sounds like also they'll need generators and also some way to communicate, correct?
Yeah, and so on that part of it, we don't leave home without a satellite,
Mhm.
satellite phone. So you got Starlink that you could use from your mobile unit if you're going to be working in the zone, and satellite phones. Now, by the time some of the roofers start staging and setting up, some of the power, some of the cell towers will be up. In the meantime, if you're part of FirstNet, which our first responder team is, or part of the Verizon type of FirstNet, they have mobile trucks that are peaked right now that are sitting at the top of the Lahaina Hill right when you're going in down in the grade into the city. So you can see the trucks are parked in that area. They're running off with temporary power right now.
Okay.
But infrastructure wise, I think you're looking at 2 months realistically for most of, not all of it, but a big part of it to have the power into that area. But yeah, you're going to definitely need power generation for job sites, probably for the next 6 weeks, 8 weeks, depending on some areas for sure.
Well, it sounds like first and foremost, people that are there just need to stay safe with their PPE.
Yeah, and again, if any of the contractors or anybody in your network is looking for resources, assistance, support, permitting, or county people that they need to talk to, they're welcome to reach out to me. I'm happy to point them in the direction, send them the contact information. I can send some of the stuff to you at this point, but
Sure.
it's evolving, so it'll be this way now.
Okay. And
Kinda
what's
like,
your email? What's the best way for people to reach you? Probably through email right now?
yeah, email is probably going to be the best. Steve@srp24.com.
Okay.
So just expect it's either going to be typically before 7 in the morning Hawaii time,
Sure.
or typically after 8, 9 o'clock Hawaii time again, where I'm responding. Because when I'm down in that zone, there's really not much there. We
Yeah.
are on our sat phones, but again, on the satellite phone area, if anybody is ever thinking about deploying to a disaster zone, or if their area were to get impacted, people couldn't get a hold of family members for days. And there was absolute panic and chaos where other people got injured in the process of that. So, not to plug it, but these guys have been one of the best on the satellite service side of it. They provide for the military as well and the civilian market. They have an office in Florida and also in San Diego and Shelter Island. And that's a satellite phone store, but just sat123.com. Yeah, sat123.com. If they have an opportunity, they have great deals they've always taken care of first responders and people in the community and county officials, but they're also good with contractors on giving them discounts. But I just think that the best thing to do is, prepare your home. And then when you deploy, make sure that your team's extremely well dialed in. So you're self-sufficient, self-sustaining, and not being an impact to the community here,
Well, great advice, Steve. And I know you're so busy. So thank you so much for taking the time to just give everybody an update as to what you're doing, how it's going, and what people need to do to stay safe if they're going to come in and try to help. Because of course, everyone in the industry they have huge hearts and they want to just come help. But of course, it's so important for everyone to stay safe, especially with all everything that's in the air, like you're talking about. So thank you so much. We're really grateful for your insight.
Well, thank you, Joe, for putting the message out there and just keeping the education going with for your contractor network. So that's awesome. It's good to see. It's nice to hear when people reach out and want to get the information firsthand from ground zero to their network. So thank
Yes,
you.
most definitely, Steve. And if anybody has any questions for us, it's roofingcontractor.com, wconline.com, roofingsupplypro.com, or buildingenclosureonline.com. And while you're there, make sure you sign up for all our free content so you can stay up to date, especially on the most important details with what's happening with Steve in Hawaii. And everyone stay safe and healthy. And we can't wait to talk to you soon. Steve, again,
Excellent.
thank you so much.
Thank you.